Thank you everybody for attending. Obviously this is a one agenda item to look at the Environment Scrutiny Committee recommendations, but we'll go through the agenda. Any apologies for absence? Amy?
Councillor Pickering and Councillor Kerry have both submitted apologies.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest? No, I don't think we've had any. Then we'll move on to the agenda item, the Environment Scrutiny Committee review on Wingerworth Lido. And as you can see, before I hand over to Caroline, who's hopefully on screen, and Amy to present that report, I'd just like to thank everybody involved with it on the committee, all the councillors, and obviously all the officers that facilitated that, and all the stakeholders and public that got involved with the consultation. So with that, I'd just hand over to Caroline first, I think.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
That's
we can.
Good. Hello everybody, and thanks for calling this extra meeting of the Cabinet and inviting me as the chair of the Environment Scrutiny Committee to come and present the committee's findings on the topic of Wingerworth Lido. As you'll know, the committee took up the motion that was referred to us from full council on the 22nd of September regarding the Wingerworth Lido. It was clear from the start that there was a lot of public interest in the Lido and lots of stakeholders that we needed to hear from in order to make some informed recommendations on the topic. One of the main things we did was carry out a consultation, mainly by way of a survey, but we also accepted email representations from all the interested parties, including residents, Parish Council, Derbyshire Wildlife Trust, the Angling Trust, etc. And we accepted these submittals because we genuinely wanted to collect as much information and as many opinions as possible and not limit the exercise to a tick box survey. The response to the survey and consultation was great, and not only did we get information that we wanted regarding people's opinions in terms of fishing and biodiversity, which were the main topics, but we also had some really good suggestions of how we could make the Lido more accessible or more educational for other people. So that was a bonus. I'd like to thank the performance team for carrying out the survey and the analysis on all the results, and thank everybody for their responses to the survey. I certainly learnt a lot about angling and biodiversity in doing this. And although I may not take up angling, it's useful information to have, and I hope that we can use the results of the survey for some time to come in shaping the future of the Lido and improving it for both the people of North East Derbyshire and nature. At the Environment Scrutiny Committee on the 8th of December, we did meet to consider all of the information, including council officer submissions, overview of the Asset Management Board processes, results from the consultation, written representations from stakeholders, and timelines of events. In terms of the Asset Management Board, just to note on that the committee were satisfied that the decision-making process undertaken by the Asset Management Board was compliant with the council's constitution. We did feel that maybe in this particular instance, greater consideration could have been given to the impact it might have on the users of the Lido, but all in all, it was compliant with the council's constitution. If I hand over to Amy Bryan, Governance Officer, if she's got anything else to add to that.
Anything, Amy?
I will. I'll just say you've got the kind of cabinet report in front of you. Appended to that, you've also got a report that's been, a briefing note that's been produced following the scrutiny review report, and also you've got the consultation survey results. The consultation highlighted a range of interests coming out of that. And to pick a few key aspects of the survey, these included that the top 5 activities enjoyed at the Lido included walking, nature appreciation, fishing, wildlife watching and dog walking. There were also very similar numbers rated fishing, community access and wildlife and biodiversity as very important. So this came out as 70.1% of respondents rating fishing as very important, 69.1% rating community access as very important, and wildlife and biodiversity was rated by 66.1% as very important. And we have appended the full survey results, so you will have seen those attached to your Cabinet report. I was just going to quickly look at the recommendations which are in your report. So these include that the Scrutiny Committee is proposing Cabinet approves interim arrangements to reinstate angling at the earliest opportunity ahead of the completion of the Biodiversity Improvement Plan, and any reinstatement should be subject to management processes ensuring compliance with the Council's statutory duties and preventing further, as advised by Derbyshire Wildlife Trust. The Council should also continue site maintenance, to recognise there is support for angling as a long-term activity on the site, providing it contributes positively to biodiversity. Recommendations also ask officers to explore examples of best practice and to support biodiversity enhancement at the Lido. There is also the scrutiny review highlighted that consultation feedback also wanted a need for greater accessibility at the Lido, which included things like improved pathways, seating, educational signage. The Scrutiny Committee also explored the idea of a community group and has made a recommendation that the Council work with stakeholders to develop an independent group, which will include the Parish Council and other local interested parties, and they will act as a consultee on the Biodiversity Improvement Plan. In terms of that Biodiversity Improvement Plan, it's recommended that this is submitted to the Environment Scrutiny Committee on completion, and that the Scrutiny Committee is kept informed of progress in terms of angling on the site in both the short and long term. It also made recommendations regarding the processes of the Asset Management Board, which Councillor Smith has spoken about, and these include recommendations regarding training for all elected members and an annual report to come to Cabinet to highlight the asset management decisions that have been made in the previous 12 months. There's financial and legal implications set out in your Cabinet report. And just to say in conclusion, the Scrutiny Committee, in putting together its recommendations, has tried to reflect a collaborative and evidence-based approach to balancing recreational use, biodiversity and governance at Wingworth Lido, and the recommendations align with the Council plan priorities supporting both environmental stewardship and community wellbeing. And the rest is set out in your report.
Thank you very much, Amy and Caroline. I think that was really comprehensive. Before I move anything, is there any questions for officers or Caroline and Amy? Joe, have you got, so you indicated.
Thank you, Chair. Caroline, as Chair of this scrutiny group, could I ask how various experts and stakeholders dealing with these sorts of issues that you've been looking at, your committee's been looking at, how were they involved by the committee to help you to come to reasonable and sensible conclusions about what needed to be done, please?
The question, Joe. Yeah, we had the Angling Trust and the Derbyshire Wildlife Trust involved in the consultation, and they sent us various bits of advice and their proposals, and we didn't want to go into too much detail because that wasn't for the Scrutiny Committee to make decisions on things like that, but we did take a lot of their advice, and we were satisfied as a committee that the recommendations that we were making based on their advice are actionable and realistic. So yes, we have taken expert advice on that and hope that the Cabinet can pass this and then take forward working with those people in the future to make sure that we're both fulfilling our statutory duties and working in best practice.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, Kevin.
Thank you, Nigel. Obviously, I'm the newest member of the Cabinet. I've only been here since September, and so a lot of this took place before I got involved, and it had become an issue by the time I became involved. So you know, part of my learning curve has been to familiarise myself with everything that's gone off prior to my joining the Cabinet, and I think the report is really helpful in that. And in particular, as well as reading the report today, I actually read all the papers that have been published by the Scrutiny Committee as well. I went through them all, and there's some really good and helpful comments there from the people who submitted them, particularly the Wildlife Trust paper and the Angling Trust paper, which helped summarise it all. It became an issue about banning fishing, and I've tried to find out where that came from, and I don't know, because every member that I've spoken to of this authority who was been involved in the process, I've never said that, and certainly in my own thought process, it's never been an issue of banning fishing at all. It's been an issue of transitioning from something that was in existence, which was an out-of-date lease that wasn't really fit for purpose, to a new vision. But I don't think anybody's ever spelt out clearly what the new vision is, because my understanding is that does include fishing, and therefore it might be helpful, perhaps, Lead, if you, since you've been involved in it from the very beginning, if you could explain what that is. I'm fairly confident in my own mind I now understand it, but just to make sure, that would be really helpful.
Thanks, Kevin. I do get what you're saying. I think some things have got lost in translation a bit, and communication. But for mine, and I think I said it in jokingly the hostage video I did in here, that I think there's a clear vision for the council, really, others might correct me, is that we want as many people and different groups to enjoy that community facility as we can. And to do that, we've got to go through this process of listening to all the different sides, what they'd like to see on that Lido, and in that area, because I think, like Caroline's thing, some other things have come up about accessibility, seating, and other things like that we'd not thought about, but through this process that they've come into the mix as well. So I'll accept it's probably taking longer than some might wish, but hopefully at the end of the process we can accommodate all the different groups and different aspects to it, whether it's biodiversity, whatever that is, and all that side to it, but just make it a nice place for people to enjoy, and that's what I think. That's my vision for the Lido. Does that answer it, Kevin?
It's helpful, yeah. Obviously, I've put my cards on the table. Having read the report, I am minded to support the recommendations, subject to everything else that's said today. But it's a transition we're making, going from where we are today to where we ultimately want to be, and that will take some time. But this might be a question for officers, really, because if we were to accept the recommendations today, what's the next stages? And if fishing does become permitted in the interim, pending the final outcome, what process do we need to go through, and any rough ideas of timescale as well?
I was taking that one, Chair. Assuming that recommendations are accepted as proposed, there are a lot of recommendations in there. There are lots of recommendations in there in terms of improvements for training purposes with elected members and some other elements which we'll take away through normal processes and work with portfolio holder in terms of making sure all them are implemented. In terms of the public interest element, the fishing and the biodiversity, since the scrutiny review, we've carried on engagement with the Angling Trust and Derbyshire Wildlife Trust on trying to get ideas of what broad terms might both protect our statutory duties and also allow the return of fishing on an interim basis. This has progressed and principles are largely agreed, broad principles, and now we go on to form an agreement. How long does an agreement take? It's difficult because there's more than the council in terms of parties involved in any agreement, but it's fair to say we'd expect that to be early in the new year in terms of getting some agreement in place to have an interim position on fishing. With regards the Longer term, that's largely dependent on the outcome of the Biodiversity Action Plan. As you'll see from the Scrutiny Committee, we've already commissioned that piece of work back in September, I believe we commissioned that. But as explained at the Scrutiny Committee, due to seasonality of surveys that are involved, that work won't start in Angor until March next year and is likely to take until September. And clearly what we can't do today is, without sight of what that action plan is, determine what them recommendations are, how they'll be recommended, because Scrutiny Committee rightly raised there's likely to be financial implications to some of those, and the council has to make those decisions in line with its normal council duties. So the furthest point I can give you is we're expecting September next year the Biodiversity Action Plan, and then there's probably going to be a series of decisions to come out of that.
Read into what you're saying, officers have been doing some preparatory work just in case we decide to adopt these recommendations today anyway, so we're not starting from day scratch. You've done some of the thinking anyway beforehand and perhaps had some conversations, but I'm not going to ask you to go into that at this stage. Can I just ask one other question as well? Because part of the vision includes a different governance arrangements for the Lido as well. And as the report makes quite clear, and has been outlined, I think by Amy, if not Amy Caroline, we had a multitude of responses: fishing, community use, support for biodiversity initiatives as well. And I think to make that work, that will require input from multiple parties and a bit of goodwill and a bit of compromise. And one of the things I took away that was hopeful when I read the Angling Trust report is they think that's possible, and they cite nearby examples where we can learn lessons because we're already doing on that. But again, it might just be helpful if officers just explain to cabinet members the sort of governance arrangements, and basically to encourage anybody who's out there who wants to participate to get in touch, so that the final outcome encompasses as much local community involvement and support we can, so that we do get the best outcome for Wingleworth and the people who currently enjoy and will in the future enjoy the Lido as well.
Yeah, and referring back to scrutiny, and Amy and Councillor Smith might want to comment if I'm not accurate, but my understanding from the Scrutiny Committee was about, we called it a Friends of group, that concept. And I think there was and I think it even says it in the report, an acknowledgement that that's become a toxic word in this debate. But the principle of having a group of local interested parties around wildlife and any other activities, and the involvement of the parish council, is an aspiration, and it's what we will try to do as well. So there's two sides to the coin. It isn't exclusive use, so the agreement, and has been said, I think it's Angling Trust that have put the words forward around collaboration with allowing biodiversity activities to take place, and that's all in the draft principles. So it is really around that the asset isn't for one group or another. It's not a pond for fishing. Fishing can take place on the pond, as can biodiversity improvement activities, and the aspirational things around signage for wildlife and other things that were discussed at scrutiny. So certainly that's the aim, and we'll start to pull that forward. First protocol would be parish council, I think, in that discussion.
And again, Chair, that's really helpful, because obviously when you read the report, you see what the Angling Trust say and the advice and support they're offering, and I think we should appreciate that and be grateful and thank them for that. But I, like I'm sure other cabinet members, we've had a number of emails over the last few days from members of the community who've got a slightly different view of it, slightly different vision, but it's not incompatible with everything else that's being said. And I think part of the message that we need to send out today is, either as individuals or as a collective, if you're part of a local organisation, to get involved in this process, because we certainly want to listen. We want the best for you, but the best people to tell us that are the people who live there and the people who are involved. So I hope if there's anybody from of that mind who's watching, that they get involved as well.
I'd echo that, Kevin. I think, like you say, there's always two sides to every story, and if we want to listen to as many of those arguments, just some, you might have covered it, Matt, but you know, when you're on about action plans and things like that, it's how, if we do agree that, and which I'm happy to do, to move those recommendations in a bit, how will that progress? How will we? I know you've sort of mentioned timescales and things, but there's various action plans, isn't there? We don't want to just agree this and then put it on a shelf somewhere. We've got to action all that, haven't we? And how do you envisage that happening, I suppose, is my question.
I suppose there's two action plans at play here. One is the Biodiversity Improvement Plan, which will have a list of actions and recommendations as outcomes, which naturally will be turned into an action plan, which we will take away. There's likely to be investment and things associated with that, so that'll be normal council decision-making processes. In terms of the other recommendations, I'd covered it previously, I think, in that we'll do that in normal processes, working with portfolio holder, Councillor Barry yourselves and the team will allocate who's doing what. There are some that aren't our team, some governance matters as well, so we'll take that away as officers in the normal way and ensure that all those things are brought forward.
Just up back of that, and I think it's in report, it's how do we monitor that as well? As a committee or a scrutiny committee, that some of these things are happening. That just a question.
Yeah, so any asset-based decisions run and go through the Asset Management Board process, which has been much explained through this process. That would be the natural place to do it, and I think what the scrutiny have recommended, rightly so, is the property functions and the functions that Asset Management Group as a body view and inform are executive functions. So the recognition from the scrutiny was that executive should be cited on that. So there is an annual report that goes to Asset Management Board on all asset transactions, which is then reported through to executive. That's the recommendation. So it would fall within that process, I'd suggest, Chair.
Clear. Any more questions for officers or anybody? Lee, do you want to? Yeah.
Yeah, if I could, Chair. Thank you very much. Like you, I'd like to place on record sincere thanks. Sincere thanks as the Managing Director to the Environment Scrutiny Committee for conducting the review swiftly and evidently robustly. And in my opinion, their diligence and balanced judgment and focus on the evidence that's sort of presented in this report has been really, really good. I also want to take this opportunity to thank our officers for their professionalism throughout this. It's been a topic of high public interest, which we always recognise as healthy and certainly always welcome. We want people to be engaged in things like this. But I do feel at the same time, however, that I need to highlight that this is unfolded against a backdrop, in my opinion anyway, of unhelpful distraction and misinformation that serves nobody. It don't serve us, it don't serve public, it don't serve our communities. And I really hope that we can avoid any of that going forward as we look to implement these recommendations if Cabinet approve them today. I'm really grateful for the committee and our staff's resolve in light of that and staying focused on the facts, processes and our legal duties which have been followed throughout. I'm also pleased to see that the recommendations reflect a balanced approach to the future management of the Lido, and that's something that I think's always been the goal right from the very beginning.
Yeah.
So I personally look forward, and we as officers look forward to working with elected members, officers, partners, stakeholders, everyone that's going to be involved in this to implement these recommendations, like I say, should Cabinet approve them today. That's it, Chair, thanks.
No, thanks, Lee. That's good. Any other comments? In that case then, can I move the recommendations? You don't want me to read them all out, do you? There's two sections really. There's 1 to 9, which we've got in front of us, that's come from the Scrutiny Committee. I'll move those. And also the Asset Management Board, bit 1 and 2, I'll move them as well. Anybody want to second them? Yeah, Jane, thank you. That's it. Are we all in favour of those recommendations? Thank you. That's covered that then. Thank you for your attendance. Oh, sorry, I've got to do that. Are there any urgent items? No, there's no urgent item. Thank you. In that case, I will close the meeting.